Hi, Duncan. How you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thank you.
Thank you so much for agreeing to chat. It's really exciting to talk to you.
I'm glad you think so. But yes, it's good to talk, I suppose.
It is. Well, it's so funny. I just finished. I do a weekly podcast with Graham Linehan and formerly with
Yeah,
Becky. But you came up right away because Helen Stanland was watching what was going on with you on Twitter today. You were really getting dogpiled by people.
yeah. It was I have boundaries, and I'd like to enforce them as politely and as fairly as I can. Unfortunately, some people like to take it further and try and incite me to say things they tend to they ask some very very personal questions about my sexuality. I do think some of them are genuinely not acting in bad faith and are genuinely questioning, but some of them are just angry people that seem to want to push an agenda, which they obviously don't like me standing up and saying, actually, I don't agree with you.
Yeah. So just to back up for a moment, Duncan here is a fellow gay man like me who lives somewhere in the UK. I'm not sure where. We'll get to that. I'd like to know. But you were recently sort of very much an activist for trans rights, and until very recently, you sort of started looking into the issue more in detail, and you've come to the conclusion that there are a lot of problems with this movement. And you wrote an extraordinary essay in it's 4 or 5 parts, I believe.
There's
Um,
4 parts at the moment. Part
yeah, so
five is
you're
now
kind of like a
being
new
drafted.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, so you're kind of a new convert. And I think I really want to talk about the impact this movement is having on gays and lesbians and gay
Yeah.
men specifically. There's a lot of talk about the impact on lesbians, and that's very important, and on young girls and on women and young boys. But gay men, we have a stake in this too. So I really want to talk to you about that, about how it impacts us. Yeah. Tell
Yeah,
us about
so I
you.
think so I I came out as gay in 1992, a long time ago. Had some issues with a slightly homophobic father, um, and a doctor who was he was genuinely trying to help, but he was a Christian, and gave me a book, and I wish I could remember the name of the book, which said that all people just have sexuality, and with practice, you can learn to like the right sex. And then it started saying how I should start by focusing on masculine women and gradually, introducing myself to feminine things. And it was no bad thing, I'd just gone a bit awry. So I remember being infuriated by that because even at 14, showing my age, I knew what I was, and I gave it a go gamely for a week. And it's like, well, no, my sexuality just stared back at me. A sexual orientation just said, it's not going to happen. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
So after that, I was university in the LGB group, and then at work, I was in by then the LGBT group, and the Stonewall Pride, trying to get. And I always had a bit of reticence because part of me always thought the whole point of having an LGBT group at work was to be a visible presence to assure that people feel safe and that we aren't a homophobic organization and we will accept people for who they are.
Mhm.
Which is the whole point. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to have socials and go around dancing. We just have to say, look, we're here,
It's
and
okay.
that's fine. And we
Mhm.
will, because I remember when I first went to work, not coming out for a year because I didn't know whether there'd be any sort of questions, etc. So just having that "we are a gay friendly organization" on the wall really made it a lot easier. So that's why I became part of that. And sort of 2016, 17, I thought, well, actually, I don't really know much about the T or the trans agenda, etc. So I made it my business to find out about that. And I remember speaking to a good trans friend of mine who was a colleague. She'd transitioned at work. It was a nightmare for her because everything they could do at work and get wrong, they managed to get wrong. So they managed to say all the sorts of things they used to say to me when I was, about my sexuality. So they'd be like, well, when do you become a woman? And And what should we do? Do you need like time off? How should we And so it was a difficult process for her. So I did understand. So I tried to understand really what her story was about. And I understood that she'd got diagnosed with, as it was then, gender identity disorder. And she told me exactly how it felt to be in a body that she was found abhorrent to her. She just knew it was wrong. She knew it wasn't wrong. She knew she wasn't mad. She also knew that something wasn't quite right in her head, but it couldn't be fixed. So the only way out for her to have a happy life was to undergo modifications to her body so that she didn't feel trapped in this male body anymore. And she did, and now she lives as a woman, and no one questions that. So that's what I thought it was all about. And then we got more education on it, and then I learned about gender theory, about how I didn't really learn about it. I sort of tuned out of it. But it was, we have gender identities, it sort of fits, so instead of actually a disorder, what she had was a gender identity of being a woman. And so she transitioned into one, and people can be a man or a woman or something in between. And I was like, whatever, seems whatever it is.
When were you learning about gender theory? Like, was this well into the 2000s by now, or?
Yeah, we're into the 2015, 16.
Oh,
by
very
then.
Recently. Okay.
Yeah, that's when I became sort of wanting to be an activist, not an activist, but I wanted to be standing for LGBT because I had the label of gay, and I was like, well, I'm only one letter out of all these acronyms, and I want to be a good ally, and I want to do everything right, so I better learn all about it. So that's what I did. Then things started going a bit wrong, and the real thing, apart from the awkward moment with the colleague at work who was posting what I thought was hate, and it wasn't hate, but I thought it was, because I'd been told, watch out for genuine concerns, whereas actually it's hate.
So you had a colleague who was saying, I have some genuine concerns, and you were immediately told that that was a buzzword for hate.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was always that, these TERFs, that's when I first learned about TERFs. In fact, the first time I learned about TERFs was when a group of angry lesbians disrupted the Pride in Sheffield, which is where I live. And we were all told to not engage with them, don't speak to them, they're just hateful. And of course, slightly misogynistically, I was all too willing to believe that lesbians were just angry. Guilty as charged. Wow. Bang to rights on that one, and I can't apologize enough for what I learned later. And then, the social media posts, I contacted her and said, you've got to take this down, it's against social media policy, take it down. Eventually she did, but I had already raised it with HR, who, by the way, ignored it and put it straight in the bin. So they're like, we haven't got time for this. But even so, I'd done the damage. And so then J.K. Rowling came up, and I was like, no, she can't. I know, I've seen Harry Potter. I've seen interviews with her. I know I learned all about her. The Harry Potter movies are so full of morality, so well thought out. How could she possibly hate? But I went online and looked into why it was hateful, and I based my opinion on what trans people thought. So I watched all these things from other YouTubers, etc., saying actually it is transphobia, it's just fear, we're just born in the wrong body and they don't like that, etc. So I thought that's fine, and I posted that on social media until my good friend from university, who I have the utmost respect for, she contacted me and said, I'm a TERF. According to your categorization, I'm a TERF. So she really put herself out there, but we had such a close friendship, and we had debated everything at university. Atheism, she was an atheist, I was an agnostic. We had a Christian philosopher. We went to the pub on Wednesday nights.
Yeah.
And we discussed.
Wasn't that funny that I also was an atheist activist, and it feels like this is sort of just, I've lost interest in that because I feel like everybody's an atheist by now, practically. But or at least the goals of atheist activism were to make atheism more acceptable in society, and I think that was kind of one. And this feels like that new thing. All the debates, all the pub meets, all the intellectual curiosity of the people butting heads, discussing the arguments. It feels like this is that kind of, in a way.
There's a critical difference though. So when I then discussed with my friend, we decided to go back a priori. We decided to go roll it all the way back, go back to definitions. And she hit me with, what's a woman? And I was like, well, okay. She said, well, you said trans women are women. That's where it all starts from. Trans women are women. She says, all right, if you're going to argue this, you have to argue it logically. And I said, fine, I can do this because I've got a big head and I know all my theory now. So I'm going to win. I didn't win. I got absolutely owned. It took 4 months of arguing, but all of my logical attacks basically ended up in, unless you define woman as something which is based in gender roles and gender stereotypes, and every time I tried, kind of comes back to that.
You couldn't get away from that conclusion.
No, so we had to agree. I had to agree, not we. I had to concede that a woman is an adult human female, right? So at that point, trans women are women has gone, right? I've got no ownership of that now. So then I tried the next one, which is, well, okay, they're not actually women, but trans women should be considered women by society. They should be treated as women. So then she said, how do you treat a woman? I was like, oh, that's a good point, actually, because I treat them like people, like everybody else.
Yeah.
Until I later found out that actually I've got some subconscious misogyny going on, that yes, we're working on that. But other than that, I treat people as human beings. But I said, well, you know, we have segregated changing rooms and things and women only spaces. She's like, yeah, why do we have those? I was like, well, because men are kind of not that good at keeping our hands to ourselves as a sex class. And we kind of are bigger and we kind of are generally more aggressive for reasons possibly biological or social or both, but we're bigger. You know, the average woman, 60% the strength of a man. You can't just wave that under the table. So I said, that's what we do. And she said, well, why should we consider trans women as women? I said, well, they've undergone sex reassignment. They've had their genitals changed. They've got breasts and stuff. And she was like, you do realize that's not true. I was like, what? Of course it's true. So then we got some stats on that. And it was like in the UK, something like 5,000 people have actually had a gender recognition certificate in the UK, I believe. Check that one.
No, that's right. That's 6 maybe now, but yeah.
But then we're told that there's 500,000 trans people. Well, if you divide that roughly by half, it's 250. I've got a big accounting error here. So I said, well, you know, and then the video of Alex Drummond came up. And it was at that point, I was like, well, Alex Drummond's not a woman. You can't get me to say Alex Drummond's a woman. He's a man with a beard, wearing fabulous clothes. And I was like, this is a brilliant video with one problem. If he just said, I am expanding the bandwidth, what it means to be a man, he'd be my hero. But he didn't. He said woman. So at that point, I was like, well, I've really got to look into this now. So then I went and started looking into what was really going on and delving into articles and publications and scientific publications, because I'm obsessed with all that kind of stuff. Found some interesting and disturbing things, such as plenty of studies into what was called transsexualism that end abruptly in 2011. There's no more papers after that. It's stopped happening. Wonder why. And then went on Twitter and started saying, what's all this about? Contacted the LGBT Alliance. And my first words were, you're a hate group, according to my friends. Defend thyself. I've still got that tweet, and they were like, no, we're not. Stop it. But I was like, oh, well, I started.
Now they like retweet you all the time.
I know, but it was funny that I actually started from the position is my friends tell me you're a hate group.
Wow.
Defend thyself. And they did. They said, look, here's our pages. Here's the stuff we say. And then other people would pile on and say, oh, but they don't support gay marriage, or they don't. It's like, well, you're putting words in people's mouths, actually. So let me look this up for myself. And then at that moment, the first thing I noticed was suddenly I encountered homophobia that I hadn't encountered since I was 14. So when I saw Stonewall had reclassified in their own glossary, go and look it up, it's an absolute travesty. Homosexual means attracted to the same gender. No, it doesn't. That's factually inaccurate. So I thought, well, okay, maybe they mean gender as sex in this case, but why would they put that there if they then define gender identity over here? Then I looked at my own gender identity, because I'd always said, oh, I'm cis, that means not trans. And then I looked it up and it was like, cisgender, having a gender identity that matches your sex. when I kept looking for my gender identity, and to this day, I've not actually found one yet. I do not have one. So I'm not cis. I can't be cisgender because I don't meet the definition. And this is why I'm a massive pedant, right? So definitions exist so that we can talk to each other and have meaningful conversations. So I identify myself as a 5'10" man with a beard. I cannot identify myself as a 6 foot man without a beard because I have a beard. It's here. It is the definition of what's on my face. So this is how I approached homosexual and gay, which was synonymous at the time before it all got a bit crazy. I am homosexual because, as I found out when I was 14, I am exclusively attracted to members of my own sex. That is it. That is the definition. I meet it, therefore I am that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I see people saying things like gay men should be attracted to trans men, and this is, and I self-punished myself again. I thought, well, actually, I'm going to try this out, right? I'm going to actually go and find out, because I don't want to say, oh, I'm going to reject all trans men. That's mean. I understand that there are people who need to change, their body to be happier in themselves. So I went and looked up trans porn because I had to know. Mm-hmm. And some of the trans men are really, really attractive. They look gorgeous.
With their clothes are on, you mean?
Then their clothes come off, and then my sexuality goes out there somewhere and shuts the door, and it does exactly the same thing as it did when I was 14, when I tried to imagine masculine women. As soon as you present me with something that is not wholly male, my sexuality checks out. It's gone, it leaves. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. So homosexual means same-sex attracted. But then online, I see the abuse. I see people saying, well, you should be interested in trans men because they are men. Now, well, they're not actually men. I said they should be considered as men in many circumstances, not in my bed and not on dating apps. Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is when they say, well, have you examined your genital preference? It's like, yes, I actually have. A Christian doctor, when I was 14, told me to do that very thing. You are saying the same thing as he said, and you're not doing it with any hint of irony, and you haven't got a religious belief system backing it up. Well, actually, that's arguable.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I think
see where I'm going with that one.
Yeah, exactly. The irony, though, that you had experienced this person giving you this instruction when you were 14, which is word for word exactly what we're being put through right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there are people coming saying, well, I'm gay and I like people with female genitals. I'm like, okay, let's look at the definition. Homosexual, right. Exclusively attracted to people of your own sex. You do not match that definition. And then they say to me, I can identify how I want. No, you can't, because I'm still not a 6 foot man without a beard.
Yeah, these words, you're just
you see,
yeah.
You see how this works?
Yeah.
And this is why I can't get about this identity thing. Gender identity, go nuts. I really couldn't care less. You can call yourself a plant pot gender or whatever it is you want. And I'm sure that's offensive, but phytogender exists, puzzle gender exists. Whatever you want to call yourself as gender identity, I can't see that. I don't know that. I can't measure, observe, or otherwise test your hypothesis. But if you say you are exclusively attracted to males, as in by the definition of homosexual, and then you have sex with a trans man, then I have an issue, because either you are a kind of bisexual, which I would call androsexual, because that exists, it's a thing, people who like masculine people rather than male people, or you're not entirely telling the truth. And I can't help thinking about the trans men in this, because there should be nothing worse than being with a partner who likes you, but just not that bit. I don't want to see that bit. And it comes back to this idea, when you had homosexual men who would get married, you've seen Brokeback Mountain, you've seen that bit where he flips his wife over.
Yeah.
And I think of how it would feel for her, and I think how it feels for the trans man in a long-term relationship. I'm quite old now. I know that you could do it for a while, but after a while, they would come that conversation where they'd say, "Do you really wish I was a real man?" And they would say, "I do," and that is crippling. And then you think of the young gay men who are, like me, exclusively attracted to members of their own sex, who have to have all the bits matching. You can't just say, you've got a male top half and not a male bottom half. That doesn't work. I always think it's funny, actually. I'm going to go off on a tangent here. I always think it's funny where they say, well, they're all men. You can't tell where their pants are. What if you divided someone longitudinally and they were half man, half woman? Would bisexuals go for that? I don't think they would, because most people like symmetrical people. So it's a stupid argument, but there is some validity in it, because I know how gender works. I know that it's imprinted on my sexuality. I know that I like cowboys and leather guys and stuff like that. I know that's because it's an extreme expression of masculine gender, which my brain has gone, that's male. That's literally how this develops. The uniforms, all that gay stuff that we do. It all develops because it's an absolute expression of masculinity, which heightens. It's like seasoning on top of a cake. Actually, not seasoning on top of a cake, seasoning on top of a pie. It'd be bad to put salt and pepper on a cake would be awful. Exactly my point. Yeah. So, it adds to it. It just enhances the whole experience. But fundamentally, my sexuality is going for male sex. That's what it's seeking. That's what it's going for. And anything that says it's not quite male, it's going to be out. So
these are all now for male sex, like you said in your essay. Like, we don't walk around naked anymore. We're not cave people anymore. So all of these expressions of what within our culture and time and place are expressions of are symbols of masculinity. These are sex signals of maleness, essentially.
Yeah.
And some people are saying the sex signals of maleness are more important than actually being male, right?
And for non-monosexuals, for people that aren't heterosexual and aren't homosexual, that big sea of bisexuality in the middle, that might be true for them. They may actually have a sexuality which looks for gender things more than it looks for the sex. That is not who I am.
Yeah.
And it's not fair to say all gay people are this or that. Excuse me. But at the same time, if you've got gay now meaning homosexual or androsexual, which is attracted to masculine thing, you've got two groups of people in there self-identifying as gay, and they're two different groups.
That's right.
So the homosexuals are at risk, us lot, because the androsexuals are saying, well, I'm gay and I like this and that. Well, you may be gay, but you're not what I am. You're not the same as me.
Because they're telling us we're bad. They're telling us that it's bad to be homosexual.
Well, it's different. Some are.
A lot of gay men are saying you have an obligation to at least make every possible effort. And only if it's just literally impossible for you to have sex with a female, then it's okay to be homosexual. But you have to go out of your way to try. And it's like, no, I don't.
I did that when I was 14.
Yeah.
So the idea that you should try to you should examine your genital preference, and then if you can't do anything about it, it might be okay. That's deeply homophobic. That is exactly what I was told when I was 14. It is unforgivable to do that. And what upsets me the most is they think they're on the right side of history. They think this is progressive. It's deeply regressive. It's back to the time where everyone is simply sexual and you can learn what you like and you can try new experiences. Stop it. That's not right.
No.
So that's why it's the rolling back. It threatens the rolling back of gay rights. And I think that while we're talking as gay men about this, I've seen a lot of angry gay men like myself piling on in support of me today. In some ways, I think that the lesbian community has already somewhat fallen, if you like. So because of the power imbalance the other way around, don't forget we've got females becoming trans men, or they're still females, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Trying to push in against gay men who probably outnumber the lesbians to start with, but we are still in a very male-dominated society. Can't deny that. Well, some people can try to deny it, but I'm not blind, still male bias. When you've got males identifying as women and then identifying as lesbians, which is really wrong, especially if you keep your genitals, you've got no right at that point to say you're a lesbian just because you identify as one. That used to be a standing joke, by the way, in Britain. You know, I'm a lesbian trapped in a man's body. That's
Totally.
a straight joke,
like a laddish pub joke. Totally, yeah.
Yeah, and they say things like, "Oh, I'd love to be a lesbian because I'd have breasts to play with and better keep my penis," and it's dangerous because I have seen the amount of abuse. I know that some dating apps for lesbians, you're not allowed to state a preference.
That's right. I know of people who have been kicked off for saying, I'm exclusively attracted to females on a lesbian dating app. And they're like, no, how dare you? That's like, it's not just bad, it's punishable. You're being banned for hate. It's like saying that you're a Nazi. It's insane.
And you can't have lesbian only groups. But we can still somewhat have gay only groups because the power imbalance is different. Because a trans man,
I mean, most trans men, most female to male, are still sexually attracted to women.
Yeah,
and even some of them
which doesn't make any sense either. But that's a whole story of what I would call a sudden, an unexpected rise in the number of trans identifying females who now are trans. Now I know that genuine sex identity disorder, gender identity, whatever you want to call it, exists, and it has done, because I remember my friends. She went through that. I understood what happened to her, and it must happen the other way. But the sudden rise in the amount of women now identifying as trans men who like women feels very much like there's just an oppression of lesbianism to such a point that some of them have gone to that stage where it's like, oh, I must be a man. Where are the lesbian role models on television? Where are the lesbian role models on television that aren't straight man's idea of what a lesbian is? Where are the butch lesbians that I know and used to have fun, pool competitions with and get my ass handed to me regularly in the pub? Where are they? Those are the role models that young women need. The women that embrace not being the parody of a woman that straight men seem to love.
Yeah, well, somebody said, I forget who, somebody said she was talking to somebody somewhere in the United States. It was like an all-girls school, and historically the school had, I don't know, a couple thousand students, and it would have about 9 or 10 butch lesbians at any particular time, in any particular season, any particular year. But now there's about 9 or 10 trans men and 0 butch lesbians. And somebody asked the student, how many lesbians do you have in your school? She's like, lesbians? Oh, I don't think we have any of those. It's like, what? You have a dozen trans men and 0 lesbians, and you don't think that
doesn't seem likely. Let's put it that way. So, and the other thing that I don't think is likely, I know for a fact, because I have a teacher friend, that there is social contagion of this in schools. And every genuine trans person I've talked to, and I hate using the word genuine trans, but words,
it's short. You have to.
Every one of them has said, well, they always knew their body was wrong from the age of 3, 4, or as for long as they remember. And the defining feature of this dysphoria is that they know their body is wrong. The later group are saying they don't feel like women. That's not the same as saying, I know my body is horrible to me. That's different.
Yeah.
And they're calling it gender dysphoria, but it looks to me like there's a number of underlying causes for this dysphoria, and dysphoria is a symptom, not a condition. And now, of course, you don't have to have dysphoria to be trans, which makes me baffled. How can anybody identify as the opposite sex by calling it a gender while being fine in their own body? It doesn't match the original trans person that I knew and her experience. It seems to, and then of course I learned that transvestites, cross-dressers, all these people, and I know they don't think they're women, maybe they do now, but I used to know people that would cross-dress, and I know why they did it. And I've been on those websites because you know that they're there. You just do a quick Google, and it's almost like you're not fooling. Well, you clearly are fooling people, but the trans woman that I know went through a transition, and she looks like a very nice, normal-looking, unremarkable, but still pretty woman. That was the whole thing. She disappeared into being living as a woman.
Yeah.
That's not what I see when you have people who traditionally would have been called transvestites and crossdressers.
Yeah. And they make up a majority, it would seem, of male to female transgender people. They've really just taken, now historically, yeah, you had transsexuals and you had transvestites, but the problem with the transvestites is that, you know, they would share to some degree online, you know, like social networks. This was like in the 90s when it was like IRC chat rooms and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I remember those. One of them was Tiny Tim.
Yeah. But the problem with the transvestites is some of them, to some degree, wanted a bit of medical intervention. They might want the breasts, but they'd want to keep their penis. Or they might want some degree of HRT, but they wouldn't want to live their lives full-time as women. So there was this point where like transsexuals were the whole all in, but then these transvestites had degrees to which they wanted to sort of, so there was a bit of a spectrum on there. So the word didn't quite fit them. And I think that's why they decided to create the term transgender and throw it all together so that all these transvestites with varying degrees of interest in exploring femininity, but while still maintaining the parts of their male bodies that they wanted to keep, could do this. So the whole thing is just kind of an attempt to let transvestites run rampant in women's spaces.
But then there's a you know, it's like this the concept of autogynephilia by Blanchard, who I know is on Twitter, and I've started tweeting at him saying, you had all the evidence right in front of you and you got some of it wrong. But I'm so big-headed, but I've got my own theories coming out. But I absolutely want to throw my own theories out there. And I want people to throw rocks at it, because that's the whole point of like learning, isn't it? You say, what if it's like this? And they say no because of this, and it falls down. You're like, well, I'll start again. But the idea of being sexually attracted to yourself and becoming the ideal person for yourself, I think gay men kind of get that, right? A lot.
Every time you go to a gym, you know, these are men staring in the mirror all day long, you know. Yeah.
Sure. The reason I'm going to the gym is not necessarily entirely for health reasons. It's because I want a nicer body.
Because you're attracted to male bodies and you have a male body, so you know
exactly. So there's an upside and there's a downside. So this is why I know that it does cause dysphoria. The downside is you are your own worst critic if you are sexually attracted to yourself, because you know that you don't match up to what you really want. So how could you be attracted to anyone? So that's why gay men have problems with steroid abuse, anorexia, all of these other mental issues with their body. Body dysmorphia, body issue with gay men is a huge problem, which we like to ignore.
Oh,
which is terrible.
It's out of control. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
You know, you've got to be really, really skinny, or you've got to be massively muscled, or you've got to be a huge, giant bear thing. It is a bit out of control, and we're not.
It's a lot out of control. I mean, I was in a long-term relationship until about 3 or 4 years ago, and it was, you know, so I didn't really care about my body or my image too much, and I just wasn't really steeped in that. But since we divorced, I suddenly was thrust back in the dating scene and as a much older man, hadn't been dating since I was in my early 20s, and now I was suddenly in my late 30s and not in shape. And the body issues that I developed were out of control. Like, I've never had body issues before. I never considered myself a superficial person like that, but it's just immediately, you know, I've taken steroids. I've been obsessed with my body, you know. Yeah. Great anxiety.
You're on the wrong apps. That's all I can say.
Right. So, delete Grindr, delete Scruff.
Well, there are communities within gay world non-scene that cater for specific interests. So you just kind of, my message to gay men is find your niche. Don't obsess about becoming the body that you want. Sorry, someone just got me a tea.
Oh, that's sweet.
11 years. Where was I? You can cut that bit. No, you can keep it in. So don't try and become the body that you want unless you know where the fantasy ends and you begin. I will go to the gym and get a ripped body because I will like that. I'll become more confident and therefore I'll be better in bed. So it's not, it is a for me, but it is a for me thing. But I can see how some gay men on that muscle team, especially, they go way too far. Everything is about they want more and more and more. So understanding that, when someone says, well, there's this thing that straight men get where they want to become the thing that they're attracted to, as if it's some weird thing. I'm like, well, obviously that exists. How could it not exist? Men do this. Men have the ability to think about what it would be like to be the thing that they're attracted to. I remember the first time that I got into a military uniform. That was fun. And it was fun because I was a soldier and I like soldiers. You see, it is a little bit weird, but your gay viewers will hopefully recognize some of this. But there's nothing inherently morally wrong about any of that stuff. There's nothing wrong about wanting to dress in the opposite sex's clothes and have fun times. What it is wrong is then to say that person is a woman. They're not.
Yeah, I don't
They're
think
exactly the same as men.
You were not literally in the Navy or whatever when you put on that uniform.
Well, no, and I didn't suddenly get the attributes and the abilities of someone who was in the military. I still couldn't fire a gun.
Yeah,
so when a man puts on all of those things and even gets breasts, etc., whatever, they're still a man. They've still got the male violence pattern. Men still commit 99% of sexual assaults in the UK, and 80% of the time it's against women, which means 20% of the time it's against us. But we have our own problems. But we can't ignore the fact that males remain a threat to women, however they identify, which is why I went on this whole thing, because I thought self-ID, and this comes back to Stonewall's stated aims. Self-ID with no medical gatekeeping. Gatekeeping's a word that's been ruined. Gatekeeping, what is gatekeeping? Gatekeeping is safeguarding. It's like where you have bouncers on doors. It's to prevent the wrong people getting the wrong things.
Yeah, the sheer narcissism for these autogynephiles to say you're gatekeeping and it's hurting me, instead of saying you're gatekeeping because you're protecting women and children, And they're like, no, this is all about me.
Well, it's the same, but the same thing is to do with the FTM, the female to male transsexuals who aren't, or transgender people who are, we think possibly they should be allowed to be happy in their own skin, have some therapy. Let's see if they can, because my fundamental belief is if someone has a chance to be happy and fulfilled in their own body, they should be given that chance, because transition means it means a lifelong commitment to drugs. It means multiple surgeries. And in 99% of cases, it means sterilization. And these are irreversible changes.
Well, people don't even talk about further down. You can't do this forever. The long-term effects of cross-sex hormone use are severe. So you're also cutting like 20 years off of your lifespan, perhaps. The longer you go on these drugs, you're going to eventually have to go off of them. Either you keep taking them and increase your risk of heart attack to such a severe degree that you're in an emergency red zone.
I mean,
you putting it, and then there's medical problems there too. Nobody's really talking about. You're not gonna be a happy, healthy senior citizen if you take this route.
No, and I think one of the things that people forget is that sexual dimorphism in humans isn't just about the genitals. The bones are different. The body is different. The epithelial layer of various arteries, etc., is different. Males will still have Y-linked chromosomal vulnerabilities, and putting someone on a different hormone regimen, which, by the way, is not homeostasis, right? You are it's like people with diabetes take insulin. It's not as good as having a working pancreas. So putting someone on hormone therapy is not as good as having a body that does it naturally. It's going to get out of balance occasionally. And the more times your hormones get out of balance, there's an inherent risk. You can't see the long-term follow-up risk. And the whole point for gender dysphoria, for the real people that were suffering, it's a balanced choice to say, okay, in your case, reassignment, which is badly named because no one's reassigning anything, they're just changing bits. on balance, it's a less bad option than letting you continue as you are. And why now it seems to be this wonderful, fulfilling, gender affirming surgery, when it's surgery, it's cutting bits out of you. And I don't want to make it sound terrifying for people who genuinely need it, because that's not fair either. And I don't think it's fair to call it mutilation. I don't think it's fair to say that the results are always terrible, but they are not the same as being the other sex, and they will have long-term health implications that shouldn't be ignored when you make that decision. And the other thing I think is that young people, because I know I was one, I've been one, young people aren't very good at thinking long term. I wasn't very good. I was always obsessed with this thing. I can't imagine not wanting to do this in 5 years' time. Now I'm older.
When I was a goth in the 90s. We're the same age, by the way, but I was like a total goth, and I would go to all the goth clubs, and it was like a whole goth district in my city at the time. It was like goth Mecca. But I would think to myself, I will never be a non-goth. I was sitting there as a 17, 18-year-old at some bar I was too young to legally be in, and be like, this is my life forever. I'm always going to be listening to the Sisters of Mercy, wearing black. I will never leave this scene. And of course, like by the time I was 20, I was like completely like, what?
Yeah, my thing was I stumbled across my old gaydar profile from when I was 22, and it said no one over the age of 35, and I actually had on there, I don't know what I'm going to do when I get older, because I'm just never going to be attracted to anyone over 35.
Wow, I was the opposite. I was like, no one under 35. I was a total daddy.
God. No, well, that's what you, yeah. But as I got older, and as I get older, I realized that who I'm actually interested in is kind of moving up with me, right? So 18-year-olds, yeah, they can look really hot, but you just wouldn't, because now I identify them as kids, and I never thought this would happen to me. I never thought that my younger friends, I now see them as people to be protected and cared for. It's almost like I've become a daddy. That's terrible. But you change throughout your life. So what I'm saying is be really, really sure. And if it comes down to things like puberty blockers, I just think that's child abuse, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because so many things are wrong with that. I don't even want to go there, and that's not relevant to the impact on gay men, except it is, because there's incidences.
Really, because those are us. It's the most relevant thing, if you ask me, because I was an effeminate little boy, and I very much kind of to some degree wanted to be a girl. And
yeah,
this would have been transitioned. And we know for a fact that the overwhelming majority of these very highly dysphoric young boys are just gay. And even the ones who end up not getting over their dysphoria and transitioning, they're still gay. They're just gay and also can't get over their dysphoria naturally.
Exactly. So there's like there are two very distinct groups. There's it was Blanchard. Blanchard was so close to being right. The homosexual transsexuals, the ones that are, I shouldn't say it because Rain will kill me. So gay they fell off. But no, it is the effeminate to the point where they've misidentified their own body. And that is a thing that can happen. And then you've got the people who are trans lesbians, which is just cross-dressers who well, they just are cross-dressers and transvestites that have gone down that road. But which I think is a spectrum, from the person who just occasionally likes to dress up in high heels all the way down to ridiculous transition with extreme. I mean, I've seen some really, I think some of them, this isn't even related to trans. Some people go to extreme lengths to modify their body.
I was just having this exact thing in our podcast. Like, I'd see people with literal basketballs for tits, like, you're not just a woman. You're not just a person who's trying to live comfortably in society as a woman. You're just highly fetishistic, Yeah. Anyway.
But even so, there's nothing inherently wrong with choosing to do that with your life, apart from the fact that women would say it's very insulting to them. They've got a point. But it's not inherently, if it's what you want to do, then to some extent, I don't think it's the right thing to do, but it's your choice. But should you be going down the medical route, or should you be prevented because actually it's dangerous to your own health? And no, you shouldn't be considered a woman, because you're
That's
still
right.
a
The
man.
part where they are insisting that they be considered actual women is such an insult. We have to be honest about that. This is driven by sex drive for a lot of people. This is,
Yeah.
paraphilic. Um, we have to be honest about that because it's what it is. And it's almost transphobic to argue that it isn't. It's almost people
Well, it
go,
is. It's extremely insulting to the original, the homosexual, transsexual brigade that
Mhm.
that genuinely want to be effectively almost forgotten about. They want to quietly get on with their lives without dysphoria, which is different from a euphoria of
Mhm.
changing your body to something you desire. Both can lead to dysphoria, but it's a very important distinction between those two groups. And then you're absolutely right. I have seen a case where it was celebrated in Pink News, which is the propaganda arm
Mhm.
that I can't read anymore, and I block them because some of the stuff they come out with is just so painful. Where they celebrate, this Christian couple, I think it was, who actually said in the interview, we were so worried our child was going to be gay. It would be a reflection on our parenting, etc. So we were so happy to find out that he was in fact a girl.
You
It's like
see,
that's transing. That's what Iran does.
Mhm.
Sorry, but it's what Iran does.
Yeah.
Which country in the world has the most sex reassignments?
It's the one
Iran.
that is the most homophobic country in the world. Remember when Ahmadinejad quite famously said there is no homosexuals in Iran? Well, he
Well,
kind of
there
had a
aren't.
point because in
Yeah,
Iran there are no homosexuals. They all get turned into trans women, and trans men,
or pushed off buildings,
or
or stoned to
exactly,
death.
or killed by their own families most of the time. Yeah, in honor killings.
So it is. So for me, the whole of this trans discussion is an existential threat to lesbians, to some extent to gay men,
Mhm.
and well, we keep ignoring bisexuals in history anyway. So I'm sure they won't be too perturbed at being ignored again. Bi erasure's a thing. This is the other thing. When straight men say, "Oh, I'll sleep with a trans woman with male genitals," like, yeah, it's because you're bisexual. When gay men say, this is the thing though. When gay men say, "Oh, but I'll sleep with men or trans men because I don't mind that part of their anatomy," it's like, yeah, you're bisexual.
Yeah,
Why does
I
nobody
lost a
want
good
to
friend.
be bisexual?
Yeah, well, I had a good friend who I lost over this recently, and I think part of the problem is that he's bisexual and not homosexual. So he couldn't understand how important it is for me to be able to defend my right to be exclusively same-sex
And
attracted.
that's where I was saying down to it. The fact that gay at the moment seems to be this fashionable identity tag. And I've seen it on Twitter. People say, "Oh, gay doesn't mean what you think it means anymore. You just want to cling to its old definition of your identity."
Oh, somebody
No.
said that the other day.
This,
Like, just
they
like,
said
just
this.
you're not
I was
special
clinging.
anymore.
They did. I've got that. I'm not special anymore. I was never special. That was the point.
Hmm.
Being gay wasn't something where I was running around the room saying I'm important. It was, there's a definition. I meet that definition. Therefore, I am that thing.
Yeah,
That's it.
and I just want to get on
So
with my life. Yeah.
yeah, I don't want to be. And this winds me up as well. I'm going to have to write about it. Obviously, this idea of the community
Hmm.
and the word queer.
Mm.
The I don't give anyone permission to reappropriate the term that was used against me while I was hit. I
Hmm.
don't want them to take queer back, and I will never identify as that. And if anyone says, "Oh, you're part of the queer community," I will say, "Don't call me that,
Yeah, there's
please."
a lot. Fred Sargent said the same thing, and of course, he's been through it all. He, was one of the founders of Pride right at the beginning, and was active in gay liberation even before Stonewall. Yeah, he has the same opinion, and I think it's totally understandable. Yeah, absolutely.
But the idea of the LGBTQIA something community, like it's a ghetto, and they some of them. I've even had this before. Somebody on Twitter said, just because you've chosen to isolate yourself from the community, and then she followed up with, "I make queer culture," which I thought was beautifully narcissistic. She actually insisted she made queer culture.
But also to say
um
that you're isolating yourself from a ghettoized community is like kind of getting it backwards. You know what I mean?
yeah, I am very much
Not really a ghetto anymore
integrationist.
so much as yeah, it's an isolationist group, not so much as a protective ghetto anymore.
And so many of them seem to, and this is why it worries me about young gay men coming up now, is because the community is a bit, I think it's toxic. I think it's insular. I think it doesn't give a crap about the world. They talk about things like cis heteronormativity. I'm like, well, most of the world's straight, most of the world is hetero. Heteronormative isn't a bad thing.
It's going to be normative forever. When
Exactly. Stop
90% of
trying
people are
to.
this thing, that's going to be the thing. Like only 1% of people are deaf. You're never going to have like, the deaf community is always going to be a minority community. It's not going to
We're
be.
not all going to learn sign language. We probably should,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, exactly.
But there are some, and this is what somebody who was really explaining what a disability, why it wasn't always a disability to me was, which is a blind person, and she said, yes, it's going to be a seeing person's world, etc., but I don't need lights. So from my perspective, you're all contributing more than I am to, global warming. So there's that, which I thought was fun. It was great. It was a great way of expressing it. But why can't gay people and straight people intermingle and be a community of people? And
well, they do now. I think the irony is in the city that I'm in, there was historically the gay villages where all the gays moved to and socialized at gay bars because they had to. They were, they were straight now were very uncomfortable.
There's no online either.
Yeah, and there was no online, exactly. And nowadays, the gay village is collapsing. There's almost nothing left. It's a husk of its former self. It went from 20 bars to maybe 4 and dwindling. It's very, very small. But the gay population in my city is huge. It's a major metropolis. It's the size of London. It's several million people. It's a big city. But they're all in the West End, which is like the hipster area. And they're all just integrated. If you're young, you'd rather be a hipster than a gay person. You'd rather your primary identity would be how hip you are if you're a young person.
Well, this is the thing. Gay has never been part of my identity. It's been what I am. I don't go around saying, "Hi, I'm Duncan and I'm gay." In fact, half the time I don't do that. And issues occur, especially in my job with vendors, etc., where they will say things like, "So are you married?" And I say, "No, I'm engaged." And they'll say, "What's her name?" And I'm like, "Whoops." Well, you walked into that. So,
but that's fun. I always like
fine.
People. It's not so easy to do it because I'm pretty obviously gay. The second I open my mouth, they're like, "Oh."
Yeah, I'm going to disappoint people because I don't have a lovely northern accent. I've got the boring English accent, but it isn't. I never. I mean, I did actually go to university and join the LGB committee, and it was such a clique of basically gay men cherry picking the newcomers to see. And I wasn't cute. I was really weird looking at 18, and I had hair and no beard. I just looked like a marshmallow upside down.
Oh,
so I didn't fit in, and also I got accusations of being straight acting. They said, "Well, you don't have to put this pretense of being straight up anymore." And I'm like, "What? I don't understand. What do you want me to do? Flounce around like I don't get it. What? Am I not?" And then it's almost like I wasn't gay enough for their little clique. And they were off partying all the time, and I kind of wanted to do my science projects. So I ended up with the wargamers and the D&D nerds. Which, funnily enough, that community and the film club and all that kind of stuff, that community had all the strange people in it. The people who would identify differently, the socially awkward group, and we used to kind of make fun of them a bit. But now it's almost like they've kind of taken over behind these people that we would have just said, "Oh God, it's that crowd again." Some of them now, especially the online community, where you see them talking to each other about trying to work out their gender identity like it's some big strange puzzle to be worked out. I don't think it is. But for me, it's pretty obvious. We have gender roles and we have gender because we don't walk around naked and everyone's trying to work out what sex they are.
Yeah.
And the mistake that humanity then makes is assuming that because you are that sex, you automatically slot into that gender role that has been prescribed for you, when actually the overlap between personality traits is massive. So that's why we get girly stuff, feminine stuff versus masculine stuff, whereas that's just all rubbish. That is a marker to demonstrate to someone what sex you actually are.
Yeah, that's right. It's all sex signaling. So when these autogynephiles They just want to possess the sex signals that turn them on their own bodies, like role play.
Like we get to automatically.
There you go. Yeah. I wonder
Let's
if
just,
like
let's just be gay. That's much easier. Oh, wait, I forgot. You can't choose. Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah. I know. It's just I feel so bad for these young people who take it all so literally. I didn't really realize until I started meeting younger people who, detransitioners and such, who've really gone through this, how literally they took this all and how the soul searching to figure out what their gender identity was so serious and so literal. And they were being predated on by somewhat older men who were, just trying to sleep with them, trying to, these are young lesbians essentially who trying to figure out what gender and sex were. And then all these males were just taking that as an opportunity to say, well, I'm really a girl. And that's part of your gender identity. So you have to have sex with me,
Yeah, and when I see now, it's kind of heartbreaking today when I see a trans man, self-identifying trans man, 19 years old, saying they've slept with cis gay guys and there's nothing they can't offer a gay guy that another guy can't. And it's like, that's kind of heartbreaking actually, for so many reasons. First of all, you're 19,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't all have to have our first sexual experience before 20.
No. But yeah,
I
I think there's a
didn't.
particular person you haven't. There's a young, sort of twinkish looking trans man who was bragging that they're always getting men are making passes at them all the time, gay men. And that person does look very, very cute, very cute little twink, but they're going to grow up. And
Yeah, and there's another danger here as well, which I don't think I haven't spoken about it on Twitter much. I'm going to put it in my sexuality um, article that I'm going to have to rewrite, because obviously having one on homophobia wasn't enough, and how to explain it all in a slightly different, more detailed way. There is a group of gay men who have a straight sex fantasy, because obviously they do, because I know what it's like to wonder about what would it be like to be a real man sleeping with a woman. That is there are some gay men who want those sort of point scoring of doing it with a woman, and if that woman happens to look like a man, they've got it in the bag, right? So
interesting. I never thought of it that way. I've certainly seen my share of straight porn, but that's just because I found straight men very sexually attractive.
well, don't get
women.
me started on porn. I only ever watch gay porn, and then my feminist friends said porn's terrible, and I said no, it's not. It's fine. What are you on about? She said, have you ever seen straight porn? I said no, and I looked at it and I went,
Jesus.
that's abuse.
Yeah.
That's
like
abuse
exactly.
on film.
Yeah.
And that's all to do with the fact that in gay porn you can put yourself in either role. So if you know if one of them is not enjoying it, and you check out, you're like, this is bad, this is awful. Never happened, because gay porn is made to make sure that both roles are getting what they want out of it. Straight porn, no, you can just tell a lot of it's just pretty much it's ugh. But let's not go down that road. But yeah, that's probably another article where I'm going to say straight people be doing porn wrong.
The way you put that, yeah.
But yeah, the idea of being a twink bottom, then that bottoms just sit there while that's not how it works. And also, when you grow up, what are you going to be then? And all the guys that are into twinks. I mean, my getting older is my revenge against twinks anyway. It's just I've got a bit of a like, well, you got old and you're not twinky anymore, and I get better with age. So far so good. Only 42. But you're making such big decisions that are going to affect your entire life. You've basically given up the chance for a family, which was something that I grieved for when I realized I was gay, because all of those dreams of having a family, a wife and kids, and all that kind of stuff, I had to let that go. I mean, less so now. I could have adopted now, but I'm happy that I didn't go down that route. That's not what I'm here for. I don't have to have kids. I'm reconciled to that now. But they're giving all of that up at like 18 and 19. I'm just not sure it's right. I'm not sure that and on the other side of the fence, apart from the really dysphoric people who need to transition, is it right to go down that fetish route? Is it surely there's I know guys into gay fetishes that kind of take it too seriously. You know, when they're like the ones that have to be in the gear all day, every day, and wear it to work and live the fetish lifestyle, and kind of, I think that's taking it too far. It's a role play thing. You do the thing, you take it off, and you're back to who you really are again. And you need to love yourself as the person that you really are, and recognize what fantasy and what reality really are. And I think that a lot of the stuff we're doing now is just enabling people to go too far into a fantasy that may come back to bite them at some point.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, this is all this medicalization. This is permanent. People go through phases. There's an interesting thing I learned about tattoos, that something like tattoo regret is much higher than we think. In fact, I think by the 7-year mark, if you ask anyone about any specific tattoo on their body, if they had a chance to do it again, would they? It's over 90% say no. They regret it, essentially. By
I
7
can't just get one of those temporary ones. That's what I do.
But I mean, it's tattoo. Everybody likes tattoos. Everybody's getting tattoos, but they all regret them eventually. Within 7 years, you're like,
Yeah.
shit.
No, I know a guy.
Why
who
are
got,
people amputating healthy body parts and making themselves sterile and thinking that this is just going to be their lifestyle forever? No, it's not. You know.
and that's what I
I
thought.
never got a tattoo because I always thought I'll never, you know, I was always able to identify within myself that my tastes change, except for the goth thing. I really did think I was going to be a goth forever.
But this is the thing. So that's why I am a medicalist, and that's why I think the idea of gender identity disorder was right. It should have called it sex identity disorder, but you know, people couldn't cope with transsexual because they thought it was homosexual. It's like, no, whatever it was, that was right. Changing it to gender dysphoria, moving it out of mental and putting it in the DSM-5 and putting it into sex, that's totally not in the right place at all. I mean, why did you do what? And then the definition of it. Okay, you've got gender dysphoria in there, you've got body issues, you've got persistently playing with the wrong toys. I'm sorry, that's not a medical diagnosis.
No, it's not.
You know, I played with flower fairies.
But how did you feel up until a few months ago, though? You were on the other side of this. So how did you feel looking at that then? There must have been some cognitive.
I didn't look at, no, I didn't. A lot of people on the other side don't look. They're given the manifesto from Stonewall. They're given the non-binary fact sheet, which drives me crazy because they're like, some people are neither a man or a woman. No, they are. Every non-binary person is a man or a woman, but never mind. They don't feel like a man or a woman. Well, that's wrong because every man is a man, and however they feel is how to feel a man, right? So if you don't have a body image problem, if you're happy with your bits, basically, you are whatever sex you are. Go be non-conforming to gender stereotypes because they're toxic. Wear makeup at work if you're a boy. And if anyone gives you any rubbish about it, do them on sex discrimination because they are only discriminating against you because you're a man. And that passes the but-for test of sex discrimination, sorry. So you've already got protections as a non-binary person because as soon as you step out of a gender role and you're criticized for it, you're being criticized because of your sex. So that's sex discrimination. So they've already got all the protections they need. They just don't know how to work it out. So when they but the propaganda comes down with friendly diagrams and pictures and gender spectrums and all this stuff. And the truth about trans from Stonewall, which is pretty much every word is, well, it's self-inconsistent as well. It contradicts itself. One person said, why don't you go through the entire truth about trans and point for point, put it to pieces? I could do that. It'll take a while, but if it's useful, I might try and do it just from a ruthlessly logical point of view because they keep doing the
useful is to just constantly reflect on, because you're so newly reformed, so to speak, you're a new apostate. There's so much value in looking back at your recent past, at how you thought then, and thinking of the key points that, you know, about your essay was that it was like, it's fresh in your mind what it was like to be on the other side.
Yeah.
So it's fresh in your mind what were the things that would have gotten through to you sooner, and what the things were that actually got through to you.
I think the strangest thing of all is that the single house of cards, if you like, that it's all built on is the mantra: trans women are women, trans men are men, non-binary people are valid. If you break that, which of course my friend did by the a priori argument day one, If you break that, once you break that, nothing stands up. Nothing stands up. That is why no debate. You don't have a debate, because if you have a debate, someone's going to say define woman. And if you don't, if you can't answer that question, you are actually advised by the Stonewall people and the gender activists not to engage if someone says for you to define woman, because woman is whatever anyone wants to define it as, which is mental. But it's a circular logic, and that's why it's not just a mantra, it's a catechism. It's actually it's a chant. And this is why, if you look at it very closely, it does bear a lot of cult and religious ideological symbols, mantras, places of worship. You know, you can, it is almost like this is the theology given to you, and you will believe it. And so these people do have a faith. So when you're trying to dissuade someone, there's two types. So people who are really into the theology, so the ideology, etc., they're difficult because they're so far in. I'm not sure how you pick them out. But there's a mass of people who just say, yeah, trans women are women, right? Trans women, whatever. But if those people are the ones that need to wake up and see that actually, no, they're not, which is why, is it Graham Linehan getting kicked off of YouTube, Twitter for saying, but they're men, though?
Men are not.
It's a fact. I'm sorry, but it's actually a fact. It's not a hate crime.
100% factual, no matter how you slice it. Trans activists believe men are not women. Trans people believe men are not women. They just disagree about who counts as a man and who counts as a woman. But we're all in agreement that there's these two things, you know, men and women, or a multitude of things. A spectrum. Well, there's still, you know, so the whole thing.
Until someone throws the intersex people under the bus in a really criminal way that the Malta Declaration says please do not do, which is sex is a spectrum and some people are neither male or female, which really wants to. So there's a thing I do on Twitter at the moment, and for anyone in Britain, DSD families, their differences or disorders of sexual development. They're a charity that supports young people and their families when they're diagnosed with an intersex condition. Intersex was kind of badly named because all it means is
it really sounds like both in one or in between. And
no, what it meant was that when a child is born and during their early development, their sex is not clear. It's not easily identified because sex is not assigned at birth. It's identified.
Yeah. Not even necessarily. Most of the time, an intersex condition is just any kind of developmental problem within your reproductive system.
Outside of the accepted bandwidth of
which is more or less arbitrarily set up, right? You know, a penis below a certain size would probably count as a DSD, or a clitoris.
And it may grow and it may not, you know. So
but
and then you know there are other ones. There are more serious ones. There are more serious. To me, you know, when people have cleft lips and other disorders of development, there's no difference between that and disorders of sexual development. They're still male or female. There are some people whose disorder means that their genotype and their phenotype aren't quite, they're really ambiguous. And the whole point of the Malta Convention and the Declaration is actually you should let children grow up if they're healthy and then decide what they want to do that best fits how they feel about their body, which is fair enough, because if someone's got XY chromosomes but didn't develop any of the male bits, you know, that's pretty unfair to then say, well, you know, you've got that in your DNA, that's what you are for the rest of eternity. But that's not what sex is. And so many people online also believe that sex is chromosomes. It's like, no, genotype and phenotype. So secondary sex characteristics matter, and your sexuality is based on the secondary sex characteristics.
Yeah, but not, you know, sometimes all of this is very interesting, but it's all very logic based. And I can see for you, the argument was one on the logic front. It was the logic of trans women and women that got to you. But I think that a lot of people, I approach this issue trying to convert people with a much more emotive angle, because I think a lot of people, it's not necessarily the hard cold logic that gets to them. It's the feeling. It's the feeling that trans women are sympathetic, and I want to say, well, they're just like humans, like anyone else, and they're not special. So I always target that other, like almost a completely different way of attacking the issue.
But I think that it's good. It's good to have both. I do think that sometimes appeal to emotion can be damaging for the dysphoric people who are going to get thrown under the bus, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to have this backlash, which it will come, You know, this is, someone said to me, my partner likes to say to this me, he said that I don't, in the long term, you know that this battle has already been won. You know that this is not going to gain traction with 90% of the world, which is heteronormative, cis normative.
Well,
Normal
it's interesting to
people,
say that, but that's not
rational people
necessarily
don't.
true. If we do nothing, it will take over. People actually have to stand up and do something.
No,
And
they
it's
do.
shocking,
But what I
that
think is that if we do nothing, then the backlash will come very hard, and there will be very many people's lives ruined in the process. So this is about minimizing the collateral damage of a backlash, because it's only a question. If you have self-ID and you allow men and women to mix basically freely, whoever wants to go anywhere, the stats will tell you, they may not be recorded properly, but they will show sexual assaults on the rise. They will show attacks in toilets on the rise. All of these things will happen. It's inevitable. And then people say, well, what's going on here? And then when they find out, there'll be hell to pay. So I'm trying to get soft landing. I'm trying to stop it at the border. It should have been done a long time ago. You know, lesbian land has already fallen. It's been invaded. From their perspective, it's you know, they've just been run over.
That's an interesting point, because that means this is very much about the well-being of, again, that word that's a little bit problematic, genuine, but sympathetic trans people, you know, helping them. Because I think that's true. You know, we need to carve out a space for people who need transition. Yeah.
But I think the collateral damage could be huge, especially to a generation of young women and a generation of gay men who could be traumatized by this gaslighting.
Well, I wonder even how many. Obviously, the literal number of lesbians is going to be significantly diminished in the next generation because of them all identifying as trans men. And to some degree, there's going to be a noticeable downtick in the number of gay men too, I think, because of being sidetracked and diverted into trans womanhood. How much do you think that's going to impact things? I think it's just shocking. The numbers are going to be blindingly.
Yeah, if you want to put my finger in the air, I'd probably say the number of lesbians is going to halve.
Yeah.
And the number of gay men will go down by 10%. That's the kind of, but
I'd say maybe 20 even, but yeah.
I think it depends on how many effeminate gay men are going to end up identifying as trans women or not. And I don't know. There is something very male about identifying with one's manhood that I think might stop the irreparable damage there.
There's an interesting point that, did you ever hear that book, The Man Who Would Be Queen, by Professor Michael Bailey? Did you hear about this book?
No, I haven't heard that one.
Oh, it was interesting. It was basically a professor who was reviewing Blanchard's work and wanted to popularize it in a sort of, popular science book. And it was about homosexuality and transsexuality and effeminacy in males. Essentially, it was really, really interesting. And at first, when the book came out, it was celebrated and it was nominated for like some kind of gay award. But then
probably transphobic now.
Well, the autogynophiles got a win that this book was going to popularize the notion of autogynophilia, and it was going to bring to the masses the idea that most transsexuals are just men with paraphilias. And they were like, "This is a red alarm. This is a red alert. We need to stop this book from becoming popular." So they mobilized, and they had the book turned. They turned on the book, and they made it effectively taboo to talk about the book. And the nomination for the Gay Award was retracted, and this and that. But the book itself is quite interesting. And one of the points he makes, which a lot of gay men, I think, are uncomfortable accepting, is that even men like yourself, who are sort of passing and straight-seeming gay men, in childhood, they don't remember it, but they were probably a lot more effeminate than other boys. And this sounds kind of scandalous, and it sounds very controversial, but he seems to be backing it up with some evidence that I think is true, that young boys who end up gay, even if they're particularly masculine gays, are actually quite effeminate as little boys, and they're very into girly things. And they kind of learn masculinity as they grow up. And they particularly take to it because they're sexually attracted to it, like you said about putting on a uniform.
Yeah, I think there's populations within gay men, as from what I've seen. There's the hyper masculines that have always been hyper masculine. They're really, really, they're so straight they're gay. It's really quite fun,
Mm.
but they are a really strange breed. But
But I think my point
most,
is, if we're transing young children who are gender
yeah,
nonconforming,
yeah.
a lot more gay men than we think are highly gender nonconforming in childhood.
Well, this is the thing. If the gender thing, there's pros and cons there. So I think most parents, I think it might be different in different countries as well. I don't know how it is where you are, but there is no, if a child, it is worrying because actually, yes, there are, I mean, even I had effeminate traits when I was a kid. I was much more open to playing with um, different boys, etc., than your average boy, except for the fact that I went to a hippie school, basically, where we weren't allowed to compete with each other. We called the teachers by their first name. We didn't have classrooms. We could learn at our own pace. We can play with whatever toys we wanted to. So I had
Oh,
a
an
gender neutral upbringing.
Yeah.
So I had a gender neutral school. We had gender neutral toilets up to the age of 10. So we didn't really
Really?
get the whole sex differentiation thing. Well, it was only until when people hit puberty, they were like, "Oh, yeah, you need to segregate the boys and the girls now because they've all gone strange," which is a good point. But when you're at primary school, I just remember it being lots of children. We didn't have boys things and girls things. That was banned. It was explicitly banned. You weren't allowed to call things a boy thing or a girl thing. It just so happened that my obsession was with the Playmobil treehouse and the Flower Fairies because I loved playing soap opera with my friend Angela. So, and then I built Lego instead. So I didn't do I wasn't rough and tumble at all. I was rough and tumble avoidant, and didn't like my big thing was as a kid was I didn't like getting my hands dirty. So there's lots of pictures of me as a kid doing this. So it's not good because lots of pictures of me doing this. It's like, oh yeah, okay, fair enough. So yeah, there were signs. There were always signs. And to be honest, you and I both know gaydar is a thing. We can usually clock other gay men, even if they are
Even if they're
passing
trans,
as straight. You can
trans
you can
woman,
tell.
you can tell a gay male trans woman from a straight male trans woman. You
Yeah,
know,
but you can
they're
tell a gay male from a straight male. It's not difficult. I don't know why
usually
people
often.
seem to think it's taboo. It's like, oh no, you can't tell someone's sexuality just from interacting with them. Yeah, you
Well,
can.
I don't know. When you go to Paris, everything goes out the window, though. I can't tell the French, the gays from the straights, but
Well, that's because you go to Europe, yeah. So you've
yeah.
got the European influence. You've got no idea what's going on there.
Like,
So
what?
culture,
Yeah.
obviously. I mean, maybe they can between each other, but we had to learn anyway who was gay and who was straight. I remember the first boyfriend that I had. I didn't meet him online. He was at the club I was at, and we never outed to each other that we were both gay. But at my 21st birthday, I got him drunk and asked him if he wanted to go out with me. He said yes. So we correctly identified each other
Mhm.
without ever declaring it to each other, because that was also the night when I came out to my friends. So no one knew, as far as I knew. But I still managed to identify the only other gay in the club. So something's going on there.
Yeah.
Um,
It's very subtle sex cues, like you just pick them up. Yeah.
or maybe some blatant staring. I don't know, something's going on. But
Yeah.
yeah, there are different traits, and also I don't think effeminate gay men never come across to me as womanly. They're just effeminate gay men. They're still men. So this idea that feminine men are women doesn't make any sense. But it does make sense that the ones that become transsexual, usually in the past, were different. And as one of my transsexual friends likes to say, she doesn't get misgendered, even though she hasn't transitioned. She doesn't get misgendered because it's natural. You can't misgender someone who presents like she does. Your
Hmm.
brain doesn't allow you to do it. What I
Hmm.
don't like is people insisting on, and that's another thing that annoys me, compelled pronoun usage, because I can't do it consistently. I say what I see,
Hmm.
and if I don't, if someone with a beard, Alex Drummond is going to get he all the time. I can't keep it going because my brain just says nope.
No.
That's
Oh,
not.
I've had that problem too with a friend who's very well, like, you know, sh- uh, homosexual. somewhat effeminate, goes by feminine pronouns these days, but is still very. I just visibly see a male person, a very sweet
Yeah.
person I like very much. But it breaks my heart when I accidentally do misgender her, and I keep doing it. Because I can see the pain in her face. She's upset by it, but it's like I can't help it. I'm trying so hard, and then I overthink of it, and then I panic, and it's like one of those. It turns into like just a slapstick comedy. Where
You try doing it. You try doing it with ADHD. It's
Wow.
physically impossible.
Wow.
So it's actually quite useful for woke points, which is to say it's ableist to compel pronouns on someone who's not neurotypical. So
Right. Wow.
if I get into trouble for misgendering people, I'm just going to play the ableist card.
There you go.
Intersectionality, it's a wonderful thing.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? No. Yeah. Well, maybe listen. It's at the hour and 20-minute mark. This has been running pretty long.
Just waffling. I was just going to say that. I've got a few more. I've got many more things to write. Not necessarily the next one I want to do is to explain sexuality a bit more, because I do want to say, look, gay guys, we are kind of fighting, because I think gay used to mean homosexual. It used to be synonymous with that. Right now, people who are identifying as gay, there are at least two types of people in that umbrella, and our inability to differentiate each other from each other is becoming toxic and leading to accusations of transphobia and allowing people to question our genital preferences, which is the basic attack on our sexuality. So I need to write that one. Then I do need to do my alternative theory hypothesis for what is going on in trans world. If gender theory is not right, what is right? What's the evidence pointing to?
And
I might write.
You say that Blanchard is like almost there, but I want to save that for like another. Do your paper on that, and then
he's
on that. I want to talk about save it. Save it. Yeah.
And the other one I'd want to do is my search for my gender identity and how I never found it.
Case of
because
gender identity.
It's not there. That's why. But I spent an inordinate amount of time when I was a person fighting for trans, because people kept saying, what does it mean to be cisgender? And I couldn't answer that question. Of course, I couldn't answer that question because I had no idea, because I'm not one. So
no, you're not preoccupied with gender. I have no preoccupations with gender. The idea of gender is not something that I'm conscious of at any moment in my life. And that
there is one.
It means I'm just me. I'm very effeminate in some ways, and I'm kind of super masculine in other ways. So I'm kind of all over the place.
And then it comes down to what the dangers of cisgender are in men, which is when toxic men get hold of the idea that being cisgender gives them an excuse for all of their toxic rubbish, we're in trouble. Because then it's like, you can't have a go at me for being lecherous and loud and obnoxious. I'm cisgender. You can't have a go at me for being all these other stereotypes. I'm cisgender. It's like, no.
It's my identity. All these negative traits that are associated with male behavior, male pattern behavior, that really
will become cisgender.
Suddenly become empowered. No, let's not go there.
So that's what I've got coming up. Hopefully, if I ever get around to writing them and stop arguing with people on Twitter. But yeah, today's homophobic attack is pretty intense. That was just non-stop assertions that my sexuality wasn't real, that I was actually attracted to gender identity and wouldn't admit it, that I didn't see trans men as real men, which was transphobic, and I should have sex with them because they can offer me everything a real man can, which actually contradicts what they just said. And they said, no one, the other one I get is like, no one actually believes you can change sex. We're not saying that. Well, okay, then that's why I'm not attracted to you. No, but you're attracted to gender. No, I'm not. I'm attracted. So it goes round and round and round in circles.
It's like ridiculous. Well, we'll have a listen to check out that podcast.
I will do. I'll have another look.
We were talking about you for the first 10 minutes.
So, I'll have a look. Is that on your channel now?
No, it's on Graham's channel. The podcast
Graham's
channel. Yeah, it's called the.
I'll have a listen. Yeah. And hopefully, after I've written another 4 articles and been burned alive by another group of people, probably, or cancelled. I mean, I can't be cancelled because I'm not a thing. So you can't cancel what isn't. So I'll just keep trying to write stuff for as long as I'm legally allowed to express my opinions fairly, and without hate on the internet.
There you
which
go.
might be until next week at this rate.
Well, that sounds like a good. I'm gonna press. I'm gonna stop the recording button.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, this has been great.